Good evening. So I decided to do a series here on my lifting journey, my training journey. I enjoy following other people's journey, hearing about how they got started lifting weights and their experiences and what influenced them and what trains schools of thought, philosophies, programs they followed. And so I did a part one where I started training in high school seriously in 1982, 10th grade after football season, lifting weights to gain weight, and just give a little brief rehash of what I covered in the first video. 10th grade, I started working out. At the end of football season, I was about 150 pounds, benched 200 pounds first day. By the end of the year, I was about 175 and did a 270 bench. 11th grade, the end of football season, I was about 175 pounds. Started working out again. By the end of the year, I was about 210 pounds, and I did a triple with 300 pounds. So at about a 330 bench, 335, 330. My senior year, I went to another school, and they had a chart on the wall for like a 275 bench club, 300 bench club, 325 bench club. And so I remember looking at that chart, and something in me, I said, I want to make a 400-pound club. I want to bench 400 before I graduate. So previous to that, my training had been, like a bodybuilder, all upper body, lots of sets, lots of reps, lots of exercises, higher reps, not training like a power lifter. And, because I want to get the 400-pound bench, I started focusing more on a bench press and focusing more on maxing out. Previous to that, I would max out with a top set of 8, top set of 7, but my senior year, I started focusing more on the bench, and so I would start doing heavy doubles, heavy triples, testing my strength. And what I did not mention in the last video, I had weight training first period, and I never really worked out in weight training. So what I would do was I would tell the weight training coach, said I'm going to come in here fourth period. I would skip my fourth period class, and I would go in there like fourth period or third period, whenever it was best time, and I would go in there and max out. So I remember I would start out at 375, and then a couple weeks later I did 380. A couple weeks later I did 385. A couple weeks later 390. A couple weeks later 395. And finally, before I graduated, I did a smooth touch and go 400-pound bench. So not with a pause, not like powerlifting bench, but legitimate touch and go, no bounce, no moving the feet around, no lifting the butt off the bench, anything like that. So another thing that happened there towards the end of the year, the gym I was training at, I'd go in there after school and I'd work up to a triple with 370 and a double with 385. Those are my top numbers that I remember. And one day I showed up and the gym was closed. So I had to find another gym. So I went to another gym that happened to be like a powerlifting gym. And so I was just learning about powerlifting, getting familiar. I see little articles in Muscle and Fitness, about a trend. I remember seeing Paul Dix, who's a 220 black guy from Georgia that benched 612 and 220, 1985. So I started getting familiar, and this he had a coach there, and he really took an interest in me. And I remember he had me deadlift and test me on deadlifting, and I pulled a really easy 465. I had never done it before. I don't remember what I squatted, but he tested me on that too. Of course, my bench was 370 triple, 385 double, about 400, 405 bench. So graduated, had to come back to my mom's, started going to this gym, and just kind of floundered around a while. I was started by Powerlifting USA and bought a powerlifting book. I checked out a powerlifting book from the library, the book by Terry unfortunately, I stopped, a lot of my hypertrophy bodybuilding type training and just started the, minimalism, linear progression, trying to peak for, a meet, not knowing any better. So my progress halted. And anyway, I ended up getting kicked out of that gym. So when I got kicked out of that gym, had no place to train. So I went back to training at the place I trained all through high school, my friend's dad's house. So I had very limited equipment. They didn't even have we didn't even have Olympic weights. We had standard weights, meaning it was a skinny bar with the skinny holes. And I don't know how much weight they had. They had over 300 pounds, but they didn't have 400 pounds. And so I had very limited equipment. I had my dumbbells only went up to 85s. I said, I don't have a lot of equipment here. I don't have anybody to train with, nobody to spot me. And I didn't ever hear about getting more out of less weight, but I intuitively understood that I'm going to have to figure out a way to get more out of less weight. And so, around that time, that was when Ted Arcidi benched 705 in Hawaii. And Ed Cohn went there. That was the first time I heard of Ed Cohn. And Ed Cohn did 859 squat, 865 deadlift, and a 485 bench or a 501 bench. And Ted Arcidi benched 705. And then I remember Iron Man magazine, Big Jim Williams, the bench 675 in 1972, wrote an article. He was talking about he was planning a comeback. So I was really psyched about the bench. So here I am at my friend's dad's house, limited weights, limited equipment. And so, but I remember about a year or so before that, I had read an article about Bill Kazmaiers' bench program. And probably a lot of you are familiar with that. But I was astounded and amazed and impressed with how much volume he did. A powerlifter in that era, that era of minimalism. This guy is doing, 3 sets of 15 with 405, with 425, 435, But this is what, and just, all these different exercises, shoulder press, overhead press, and such high reps, so many sets. Didn't train like any other powerlifters I'd ever seen before. But what struck me about his program was I noticed that he would do, after his regular benching, he would do sets of wide bench and sets of narrow bench. And what I understood from there was that it seemed to me like he would alternate them, do one set ultra wide and one set ultra narrow. And he would do 3 sets of 15, use the same weight for everything. So when I got there, I'd been wanting to try that. It made sense to me. You train the blast off the chest, and you build and develop the chest with the wide grip bench. And then you train the triceps and the lockout power with the close grip bench. So I got there, and the first day, I started out at, it was about, if I remember right, it was about 280, 270. I think it was 280. And I would alternate sets of 6. I did 2 sets. I'd do a set wide of 6, 280 for 6 wide, ultra wide. and then 2 sets of 6 ultra close. I had about a shoulder width grip. And so I'd read about how Jim Williams trained bench 5 days a week, so that intrigued me. And so in that time I was just, trying everything and paralysis of analysis, paralysis of analysis, trying all these different things. But I started benching every other day. So every other day I would bench and I would add 5 pounds. And so I just kept going up. And, my friend's dad, when he talked to me, he said, I talked to this guy who goes to this gym, and he says, you should probably start going to that gym, because they'll really challenge you. There's a lot of strong guys there. He says there's guys there that bench 500 pounds. And so I started going to that gym, and I remember I saw a local bodybuilder that I played football with. He was on steroids, but I remember I saw him do a 500 double on the incline bench. So I started going there, and anyhow, I kept using the same program when I got there, and that gym they had the big fat 45s. So they looked. We had 405 on the bar, looked huge. But I can remember I had finally worked up to doing two sets of six with 365 wide and narrow. And so I remember I tripled 430, and then I tripled 430, and I did a single touch and go with 460, and I barely missed 470 with the lockout. Touch and go, but very smooth. So I got my bench. Remember, I'd already been training for 3 years, seriously, consistently, nonstop. Already had a over 400-pound bench naturally. My bench was about 405, 410, kind of stuck there, had a plateau. But once I started doing that, alternating the wide grip and the narrow grip, the wide grip for the blast off and to develop the chest, and the close grip to develop the triceps and the lockout. And when you go back to the regular grip, you don't have any weak areas. So I went back to a regular grip. I moved my bench up about 50, 60 pounds in about 6 months. So I got a 460 bench. And this was after high school, before powerlifting. And I weighed about 250 at the time. So I remember at that gym, this guy comes up to me and he says, "Hey, you mind if I work in with you?" He did 315 for 8, so I could do 315 for 8. And I did 405 for about 5 or 6. I don't remember if I did it for 5 or I did it for 6, but 460 bench, somewhere in there. And I remember he put on 405. He says, "I want to get at least 8 with this." And I thought, wow. So he knocked out 8. I learned later this guy had done a 520. He was a bodybuilder, but he did a 525 bench at 181 officially in competition. So anyway, that's part 2 of my journey. That's post high school, pre powerlifting, how I got my bench up to 460. So thank you for listening, and I wish all of you the best in your training.